Imagine you've just acquired the most lucrative business in 14th century England. You aren't a lord. You don't own a sprawling stone castle. You don't command a private army of knights. Instead, you own a wooden, thatch-roofed building on the corner of a muddy crossroad. The air inside smells like stale yeast, roasted mutton, and unwashed wool. You are a tavern keeper. And right now, in the year 1345, you are the absolute center of the medieval peasant economy. Today, we think of bars and restaurants as notoriously risky investments. They have high turnover, brutal margins, and unpredictable supply chains. But in the Middle Ages, the local tavern wasn't just a place to grab a pint after a long day of plowing fields. It was the local bank, the news station, the courtroom, the hotel, and the primary business incubator all rolled into one. If you controlled the ale, you essentially controlled the microeconomy of the town. But running this medieval cash cow was incredibly complex. You had to deal with highly regulated, hyper-local supply chains. You had to navigate a labor market about to be devastated by the literal bubonic plague. You had to bribe corrupt sheriffs. And you had to deal with government inspectors who tested your product by pouring it on a wooden bench and sitting on it in leather pants to see if they stuck. I'm serious. Grab a tankard. We are going to break down the initial capex, the massive overhead, the volatile revenue streams, and the bizarre regulations of the medieval hospitality industry. This is the economics of owning a medieval tavern. To start this business, you need capital. In the 1300s, you can't exactly walk into a local bank branch, show them your business plan, and get a small business loan. You are operating inside the feudal system. Every square inch of land is owned by either the local lord, the king, or the church. So, first, you need the real estate. You aren't buying a freehold commercial lot. You are going to sign a lease, a copyhold, which gives you the right to operate your business on the lord's land. But your rent isn't just paid in silver pennies. Historically, medieval rent was often paid in kind. You might owe the lord 10 shillings a year, plus 4 fat capons, chickens, at Christmas, and maybe a barrel of salted eels during Lent. Once you have the land, you need to build the tavern. You're building a wattle-and-daub structure. Wattle is a woven lattice of wooden strips, and daub is a sticky mixture of wet soil, clay, sand, animal dung, and straw used to coat it. It's cheap, it's effective, but it is highly flammable. Fire is the #1 threat to your business. If a drunken patron knocks over an oil lantern, your entire livelihood goes up in smoke. But the building isn't your biggest capital expenditure. Your biggest capex is your brewing equipment. In the medieval era, water from the local river or well is often contaminated with agricultural runoff or human waste. It is unsafe to drink. Therefore, everyone drinks ale. Men drink it. Women drink it. Toddlers drink it. It provides a massive chunk of their daily caloric intake. But ale spoils in a matter of days because hops, which act as a natural preservative, haven't been widely introduced to England yet. Because the product spoils so fast, you must brew constantly. To do that at scale, you need massive copper cauldrons, giant wooden fermentation vats, and a malt house. A high-quality copper brewing vessel could cost you upwards of 2 to 3 pounds. In an era where a skilled carpenter or mason makes 3 or 4 pence a day, that copper pot is the equivalent of buying a $500,000 commercial-grade industrial kitchen today. It is your most valuable physical asset. If the tavern catches fire, you don't save the tables. You don't save the beds. You grab 3 guys, and you drag the copper pot out the door. Let's look at your operating expenses. Your entire business model relies on one core commodity, grain. Specifically, barley and oats. This makes your tavern highly vulnerable to macroeconomic climate shifts. You are entirely dependent on the local harvest. If it rains too much in the spring, or if there's an early frost in the autumn, the harvest fails. When the harvest fails, the price of grain skyrockets. Now, in a modern business, if your wholesale costs go up, you just pass that cost on to the consumer by raising the price of a pint. But in the 14th century, you can't do that. The local government heavily regulates the price you can charge for ale. This means a sudden spike in grain prices completely wipes out your profit margins. You are squeezed between fixed retail prices and volatile wholesale costs. To flavor the ale, since you aren't using hops, you have to buy a botanical mixture called gruit. Gruit is a blend of herbs like yarrow, mugwort, and heather. In many towns, the local lord holds a strict monopoly on the sale of gruit. You are legally forced to buy your flavoring from the lord at whatever price he dictates, effectively acting as an invisible tax on your supply chain. You also have massive labor costs. Running a tavern is not a one-person job. You need alewives or brewsters to actually manage the complex fermentation process. You need a tapster to serve the drinks. You need an ostler to take care of the horses of the traveling merchants who stay in your rooms. You need scullery maids to clean. And in the mid-1300s, Your labor costs are about to go through the roof. Why? The Black Death. When the bubonic plague sweeps through Europe, it wipes out anywhere from 30% to 50% of the population. This is a human tragedy, but from a strictly macroeconomic standpoint, it creates a massive labor shortage. Suddenly, your tapster realizes he is the only guy left in town who knows how to do the job. He demands double his previous wages. The king tries to stop this by passing the Statute of Laborers, a law freezing wages at pre-plague levels. But as a tavern owner, you know that if you don't pay your staff under the table, they will just walk down the muddy street and work for your competitor. Your labor costs are spiraling out of control. But your weirdest overhead expense isn't grain or labor. It's the ale conner. Remember how I said you couldn't just sell ale at whatever price you wanted? The government enforced something called the assize of ale, an ancient consumer protection law tying the price of ale directly to the price of grain. To ensure you weren't watering down your product to save money, the town appointed an official inspector called an ale conner. Here is where the history gets beautifully bizarre. To test the sugar content and quality of your ale, the ale conner would allegedly pour a puddle of it on a wooden bench. He would then sit in the puddle wearing thick leather breeches and wait until it dried. If his pants stuck to the bench when he tried to stand up, it meant the ale had a high sugar content, meaning it was brewed properly with enough malt. If he didn't stick, you were watering it down. You were instantly hit with a massive fine. And the kicker? You had to pay the ale conner a fee for this service, adding a literal tax for a government official to come ruin his pants in your establishment. So with all these expenses and regulations, how do you actually make your money? Revenue Stream 1, Volume Ale Sales. This is a high-volume, low-margin game. You are selling ale by the gallon. A gallon of good ale might sell for 1 to 1.5 pennies. Because it doesn't keep, you have to move product fast. You put a bush or an evergreen branch on a pole outside your door. This is the universal medieval billboard screaming to the illiterate peasants. Fresh ale inside. Come drink it before it turns to vinegar. Revenue Stream 2, Food and Trenchers. You aren't serving Michelin star meals. You are serving thick stews, pottage, heavy bread, and roasted meats. But you keep your operational overhead low because you don't even use plates. You serve the food on thick, stale slabs of dark bread called trenchers. The hot juices soak into the bread. The customer eats the meat, and then either eats the bread plate, gives it to the poor outside the door, or feeds it to your tavern dogs. Zero dishwashing overhead. It's an operational masterpiece. Revenue Stream 3, Hospitality and Lodging. Merchants, pilgrims, and tax collectors traveling between towns need a place to sleep. You rent out beds. But notice I said beds, not private rooms. A traveler is paying for a spot in a large bed shared with 3 or 4 completely random strangers. It's hyper-efficient space utilization. You are maximizing your revenue per square foot, even if the user experience, complete with fleas, drafty windows, and snoring strangers, is absolutely terrible. When you add it all up, was owning a medieval tavern profitable? Absolutely. If you could survive the volatile agricultural markets, avoid burning your wooden building to the ground, and keep the local sheriff properly bribed with free drinks, you could amass significant wealth. Many tavern owners became the richest commoners in their villages. They became mayors and aldermen. They were the ultimate networking hubs, hearing every piece of gossip, trade secret, and political rumor before anyone else. But the margins were razor thin, and the work was brutal. You were awake before dawn to start the fires beneath the copper vats, and you were up past midnight breaking up fistfights between drunken mercenaries playing dice in the corner. When you look at modern hospitality businesses, which we've covered heavily on this channel, from supermarkets to gas stations to restaurants, the core economics haven't actually changed much in 700 years. You are still managing complex supply chains, battling government regulations, trying to optimize your commercial square footage, and desperately hoping your customers keep coming back for another round. The next time you sit down at a bar and order a pint, just be thankful the health inspector isn't testing it with his pants.